Go.
Well, hi everyone. Thank you for joining today. Dimension Data's Google Hangout. Today we're going to talk about driving into data center automation, and I am joined by two colleagues. My name is, before I mention them, my name is Frank Casey. I'm the Group Director for our managed services in the data center. And I'm joined by Kevin Leahy, who is our Group General Manager for data center and consulting and our managed services practices. And also with Alan Turnley-Jones, who is in South Africa, so it's a little bit late for him. And he is the Principal Director for our service development. So today, as I said, we're going to talk about data center automation. What does that actually mean? We'll cover what it is by sharing some of our learnings along our journey. Why is it important? And explore what some options are that as organizations, as you decide to go and look at what your infrastructure is and decide to automate, things that you should consider. And before we jump in and we start, I just want to mention to everybody, if you have any comments or feedback, please comment to any of the social media sites, and our hashtag is DD Hangouts, and you can get that on Twitter or any of the other social media. So by introduction, over the past decades, the data center has been transforming from a big physical building to just being about the facility, the infrastructure in the facility, and it is a very monolithic and very much non-integrated platform. And when you had to integrate, you have to spend a lot of time from an operational perspective, from putting software together, driving specific policies around how to do that, and maintaining of that infrastructure, and the policies to manage that. But as we kind of fast forward to where we are today, there's so much technology and so many options like cloud and converged infrastructure that is delivered with the this somewhat panacea that automation is going to be built in, and there's going to be so many things that you can take advantage of that are out of the box. And what we want to talk about is how this is impacting current operations within organizations from a skill sets perspective, just from the technologies in general, and talk about what we've done in our own delivery and service offerings. We've been on a journey for several years now to try to automate as much as we can by driving as much efficiency and better services for our clients. So what I'd like to do is kind of turn it over to Alan first. So Alan, as you think about what I kind of just went through, try to look at what we've done in the past and share what we've learned in what we've been doing over the past several years to automate our delivery and our data center infrastructure for our clients.
Yeah, thanks, Frank. I think it's been an interesting journey we've been on as an organization, both within the data center space and broader, as we've begun to address and execute around the I guess the subject of automation. I think, which is a is a word used a lot, and once you begin to unpack it, you really truly begin to understand I think some of the challenges it brings about in an organization. So I guess looking at dimension data and the way that we've approached it, and specifically how we've applied that experience into the data center space. I think we first principle that we work to is it isn't a 100-meter race that we're in. I think when you look at automation, we look at environments that you're going to automate. It's something that a business becomes part of their DNA, and something that they need to do. And I think we've been fortunate that over the last couple of years we've been able to put a lot of those disciplines into practice, and through our service businesses around the world, we've got a high degree of automation in place. I think some of the experiences we learned, first of all, was looking at the processes we had in our business, and specifically starting at the policies. And what needed to change as we looked at automation. And there wasn't a lot of the policy level, but as we got into the process, the underlying procedures, we really began to question perhaps the way that we'd done things in the past, and what automation could bring to the way that we serviced our clients in our global and regional businesses. We also looking at the automation specifically around sort of remediation, and that was an area that we started. For remediation automation to be right, to be meaningful, we took a look at what we were doing today, and I think specifically ensuring that we had the right metrics in place to determine where automation would make sense in the business. I think it's a very big area, and without having metrics that we could go and sort of mine and understand, where we would get the best returns, where the client experience would be derived. We didn't have a point of departure, so we did spend quite a bit of time, revisiting a lot of our metrics, looking at them, measuring them before we embarked on, really, focusing our teams on the automation aspect. That probably brings me to the point around our workforce, and this is probably the biggest challenge ourselves as an organization, and probably many organizations face out there. I think automation and the word conjures up some concerns in what it would bring to the existing workforce. So we spent a lot of time with our teams looking at automation, how we could enable the existing workforce to drive more automations into our business without the threat of automations taking away the human element. And I think that organizations that are embarking on bringing automation into their businesses need to watch that very carefully. It's an area we continue to have teams working on, and working with our teams and new ways of doing things to really ensure that we retain a lot of the skills within our organization. I think a lot of the automations, while things can be brought off the shelf, I think enriching the information, enriching automations requires a level of skill set to remain within the organization. I think a number of other aspects and experiences we learnt along the way. The whole discipline of knowledge management, having the right knowledge practices in place in the organization, understanding what sits within that knowledge, and how we could use that knowledge data in the way we would automate our services, and ultimately the experience that the clients would receive from the way we deliver our services. We've moved and spent a lot of time, not just looking at sort of remediation automation, looking in automation around the provisioning aspects, the patching aspects, and we continue to look at these areas and determine how best we can service our clients. I think as an organization, we always want to retain high client experience. So there are things that just don't lend themselves to automation, and specifically if we look at the data center space, there are things that we want to retain skilled engineers engaged with and working through. But the run books we've developed, the IP that now sits within our organization, has really begun to flourish. All of this is, really hinges on scale being in the business. And if you look at what we've, done as an organization, scale and having a scale across the world, across all the countries that we operate in, has been, a key ingredient in the success of building the right services with the right levels of automation. Having a relatively small environment and trying to automate that without, I guess, the inherent knowledge and disciplines probably won't return the benefits that many organizations would want. I've mentioned metrics, and I'll mention it again. I think we continue to place metrics into our business, to ensure that the way we drive automation, the way, whether it be the remediation or provisioning or patching or any other elements around that are measurable. We understand where we should be focusing improvements in the way we automate, or if there's areas that we haven't automated yet, which are the next ones that we will go and invest in. And I think sort of lastly, looking at what's been an enabler here has been the investments that we've made, and investments are not insignificant in the platform, to support the automations and what's required around that. You know, lastly, the experiences we had to revisit our development methodologies, really to make sure that they were more agile in nature. You know, introducing a lot of practices around DevOps, and ensuring that, you know, we can build the automations, you know, in a relatively fast time. You know, every client is slightly different. So as we build our services, while we have standard services we go to market with, we've always got to tailor some of these things to specific clients' needs. And having a methodology that's agile in nature is really you know, an important part of that. So, I mean, Frank, those are some, you know, some of the thoughts we've had and experiences we've had over the last couple of years in getting to, you know, this point around supporting the data center from an automation perspective.
Oh, great. Thanks, Alan. I think it's important to also, I guess, note that this is a significant journey that you end up going on, and we've spent a lot of time from what you just went through, a lot of time and effort in changing the landscape of what we do for our customers and our clients. So good stuff. But before I switch to Kevin, I just want to remind everybody, if you have any comments or feedback, please send anything to our hashtag, DD Hangouts. So let's take a perspective on what some of the trends are in this space, and what things should clients look at as far as the challenging with all the different options we have. And Kevin, I think from being the global, you know, having the global hat with kind of dealing with all the countries that we kind of find ourselves in, I think you have a pretty broad perspective on what you think or what you're seeing happening in the market. So what are some of the megatrends that you see in the market that are allowing organizations to take advantage of software-defined data center models?
Well, I think first, thanks, Frank, for giving me a chance to participate here. I think, you know, our own experience that Alan described is very similar to, you know, what many clients are going through, with the, you know, couple of, you know, significant exceptions, which is really the scale at which we built out a global deployment, and not the least of which is being, of course, the investment we were able to do. And I think one of the big challenges, you know, most clients have is being able to peel off the investments to be able to say, am I going to put enough resources there? Because the reality is, as they virtualized, if it's compute, as they look at their storage growth and their data growth, you know, most clients have fewer and fewer resources to invest in the automation. And Alan sort of painted a picture, which I think is very important, because it shows, you know, the breadth of things impacted as you get into an automation environment. But I think when you actually start to step back, you have to also think about, what do you mean by automation? And I think the definition itself of automation has changed over the last decade. And if you were to, you know, go back 10 years, we were talking about automating, it was almost always provisioning. Could I provision something? And in many ways, that was important. In fact, early on, I think I did one study with a client where 70% of their labor was invested in just provisioning new storage, you know, configuring LUNs, doing all those things. So provisioning was a significant element. One of the trends that's really changed, though, is, you know, cloud has really changed the expectation for automation. It's not just about configuring up something and be able to stand it up. You know, if you think about something in a consumptive model, if I don't turn it off, I actually don't save anything. And so the very basic step of, you know, when do I turn things on and turn things off? You know, many people only turn them on. They didn't see the change, and they saw runaway resources. So the expectation has changed, and the approach has changed dramatically because the tools are there now. So if I were to step back and say, you know, how do we see clients successfully approaching it? The first step is, you know, recognizing what to automate. You know, I gave the example of, you know, 70% of the, you know, workload being, you know, configuring a LUN perhaps. Or if I'm using a cloud, while the whole cloud is, you know, automated, someone still has to turn it on, turn it off, and link it to business policies. And so the level at which you automate might change. So what specifically are you automating? Are you automating infrastructure within your data center, or are you automating a cloud that might be outside of your data center? And then the second thing is really define a policy. When does this automation occur? Are you bursting into a cloud as an example when you have peak workloads? Are you configuring a dev test environment when the developers come into work? Are you spinning up resources because you need to troubleshoot a problem? And so the specific, what are you trying to automate and when are you trying to automate it? Turning things on and turning things off, and really the policy that comes with that. So under what case will you do it? So in many cases, you will have the ability to move workloads into a cloud or to provision a new server, a new virtual machine on a server. Well, let's say there's two examples. Do you want that workload to go into a public cloud? Do you want it to go into a cloud in that region? Maybe you have a governance policy. The same is equally true inside your own data center, which is, do I want that workload sharing an infrastructure with this other workload? Perhaps those servers are, belong to different lines of businesses. Perhaps one workload is going to introduce a peak, a heavy workload traffic on a very important high quality of service workload that sits on that server. So, first you have to start with the what, then the when. What's the policy? When do you do it? And how do you inform that? And I think actually that step of the when is going to be one of the major challenges. We've sort of gotten the tools in place to make those decisions on servers. The new challenge, of course, is going to be software-driven networking. And when do I worry about, how much noise, how much chatty traffic, if you will, are you going to introduce into that environment? So each of those things introduce, a new set of questions that, in many cases, you talk to a client, the what's and the when's sits in one person's head. It's not codified. And if you can't write it down, you can't define a policy, then you can't automate it. And that's a very important step. So you got to be very clear as to what value am I going to get. One of the other trends that's changed dramatically, though, is because of this consumptive model, people are more looking at decisions that line up with business events, that let business trigger things, than in the past. They simply were doing automation to take out a few labor tasks. Well, I might be able to save in a process, but if I can avoid having an infrastructure up and running, 9/10 of the year, and maybe only 10% of the year is it actually running, that's a bigger savings than if just taking some labor steps out. And I guess the third is very significant, is the whole notion of process. Because all of this is great, but if you don't modify your processes, most often you find that you're doing them the way you did it on the old manual processes for physical resources, and you don't take advantage of some of the very basic things like image management, or you don't take advantage of things like I have a tiered storage infrastructure and I can move things between tiers based on retention and access policies. So what are those processes, and how are you doing that? A simple example of, I would say, is great. I can turn on a server. And can I also automate the security? Can I also automate the network so that that server is actually workload accessible, as opposed to a VM that's up and running, but you wouldn't actually want production workload running on it? Do I back things up? If I'm going to turn things off, do I back them up before I turn them off? Or is that information lost? So what happens to clients? I think Alan made the point. Skills is a massive issue, and understanding what do you do that. Now, one thing though we see certainly in trends though is the architecture can really help you in that space. So in the past, if you went back 5 to 8 years ago, people would automate at a domain level. They would specifically automate this server, this technology. And the result of it, though, is I had to invest in skills for every technology automation tool. So I actually, just created new pillars. The pillars included automation, but I still had unique pillars, and everyone had a different tool set. Everyone had a different, automation approach. As we fast forward now today, the overhead for virtualization is, virtually gone away. What's really now available there is I can introduce tools that span the domains. And I can introduce consistent policies and processes across all of those domains, and things like OpenStack APIs and things like that give you the ability to talk to every device inside the environment. Also, it gives you the ability to talk to the cloud that's outside of your environment. If you will, that's the future of the data center. It's going to be the software-driven networking, the network interconnect, the cloud, and the on-premise assets. And I can automate them all consistently. which means I can really invest in processes that are going to be optimized for my business and trigger that. So the architecture is very critical. It actually needs to be decided before the tools themselves. And then finally, I guess the last thing I would point to is the best practices. One thing that cloud providers understand probably better than most clients is what's the effect of multi-tenancy. So how much extra overhead do you need to leave for spiky traffic at different times of day? And I think that's an area where it's a difficult thing for any individual business to learn. Because of our years of providing cloud, we have consistent policies. So when we install a cloud, we start with best practice. Now that's not always the right answer for any given client, because of their individual workloads, but it gives you a starting point. Instead of going to 90% utilization, maybe you only want to run at 60%. So you have to understand those trendings. And then finally, I think analytics that lets you do predictive troubleshooting, or at least learn based on how much capacity you've got, when to automate in new capacity, either based on service level delivery or workload traffic, or even understanding the time of day or time of year when the traffic is going to change. So being able to add that analytics step, so you don't actually have to just codify that one smart guy in the back room, but actually then take that and extend that and learn every day about your new client usage patterns and have that affect your automation policy. So in a short run, Frank, that's kind of what we're seeing, in clients we're talking to today. It's certainly a hot topic.
Right, that's a short run. That's a lot of stuff. As I said, there's so many options that clients have to think about today, and there's so many megatrends. So that's a good segue before we kind of touch on any questions or anything that that are coming in. I mean, what do clients do with all of this? I mean, how far do they go with automation? I mean, with all the things that they have to kind of decide whether they build it themselves or do they actually go to a cloud or just kind of retrofit their environment and do it kind of automate as much as they can.
Well, let me tell you what clients frequently ask us is the what are their competitors doing? What do we see in the industry? And I think the key for us is to sort of understand where's the value in the automation, because you can't automate everything. And then frequently we will hear that, and I'll ask the question, why? What's the value in it? So if I have a consistent run book, workloads that stay pretty static, and there are workloads like that stay pretty static, throughout the year. You can drive to 90% utilization levels, and I have one change window a year. Why would I automate that? A really well-run virtualization environment, that might be just fine. However, I've also been to other clients where they have 3 change windows a day. And there, you better be automating, or you have no chance. Or if it's very significant policy that I have to enforce security with this, or I have to, for governance or other reasons, I need to do those pieces. So the first step is really, deciding where to invest and where can I leverage best practices. And frequently we get the question, what can I do standard versus what do I have to keep doing custom? And so, very often we will work with a client who will say, this I differentiate. I differentiate from my peers, I differentiate from my industry, and I've done some very sophisticated things. That's a great area for them to automate. The other case might be more traditional, sort of non-differentiating workloads, and that might be a better case to take advantage of automation that's already done by a cloud provider or someone like that, because you're not going to differentiate your business there. And those are some of the things we get into, is where and when and what is the real business value of doing it versus the cost and the investment to do it. Because you have to decide, am I going to invest in linkage to the business process, or am I going to invest in actually automating infrastructure? And most often it's the linkage to the business process that drives more differentiating value.
Okay, well, great. Thanks, Kevin. Alan, I know you've got a lot of experience with our clients and working on the service development side. Is there anything else that you want to add to what Kevin said for what clients should consider?
I mean, I just think it's you know it's a big area to go into, and I think it's understanding that a lot of the value comes with the scale, and if in small environments, is the return going to be there? I think our experiences has shown that until you've built up the appropriate level of knowledge, sometimes it's battle to justify some of the returns, but we've certainly seen with the scale that we've got, there's been some fantastic returns once we've really began to accelerate automations across our business.
Okay. Well, I think we're just about out of time. I don't think that there's any questions on the Hangout, but if anyone that looks at the video later, feel free to post any questions on Twitter using our DD hashtag, and we'll come back to you with any answers that come in. So with that, I think we'll close out, and I'd like to say thank you for your time. Thanks, Kevin, and thanks, Alan, for your time, and have a great day.
Thank you.